Hey guys, this is Josh from Grapplezilla, and today we have a great interview with Tom Billinge from WarYoga. I've been following WarYoga on Instagram and very impressed by his content and his, let's say, viewpoint into Indo-European martial arts, training systems, etc. I'm really looking forward to this interview because I got to see what WarYoga is about because it looks pretty cool. Let's go. Hey Tom, how you doing, buddy?
Hey Joshua, how you doing? Great
Good,
to
good.
meet
This is
you over Zoom.
Yeah, for sure. Just for you guys, this is Grapplezilla's first, I guess, podcast interview. And I wanted to have Tom because actually I've been watching his Instagram for a long time and absolutely amazing stuff. And I'm a big fan of people who try to look at historical aspects of martial arts, but define them into modern day because a lot of these martial arts were used for war and health, and they still have practicality. Maybe some of the stuff is lost, but Tom here is doing it. And so, Tom, what is war yoga? Tell me.
Okay, so at its essence, war yoga is a set of martial and physical and spiritual practices that would prepare somebody for war ultimately. Now, I look at it through the lens of these sort of very ancient Indo-European people who then spread out into various parts of the world and brought with them their martial tradition. They were a nomadic group of people on the steppe in Asia many thousands of years ago, and they spread into India and Persia and into Europe and beyond. And they, being a warrior people, had sets of exercises which we don't know what exactly their exercises were, but what we do know is that all of the places they touched have essentially kind of exercises that are, you can include actually just even wrestling and boxing and things as being something that prepares somebody to be able to fight in an actual battle, where you actually have to, fight to the death ultimately. But war yoga is a synthesis of the mental and spiritual aspects of what somebody would need to get ready for that, plus the physical aspects as well. And so it kind of puts those two things together. And that manifests differently in different places in the world, but ultimately it could be sort of strength and conditioning exercises in the sort of sense that people would be more familiar with the idea of yoga coming in there, or all the way up to actual combat sports, which are also a form of preparation.
Did you find that it was incredibly hard to find a lot of these exercises and stuff because it's not a lot of literature in the West about it, right?
Correct. Yeah, no, that's correct. So there was a little bit. I first started kind of diving into the Indian stuff, hence, the use of the word yoga, so to speak, because what they're doing there in India, I actually found originally through mace work. Doing swinging the mace, which has started to take off quite significantly in the West over the last few years.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a very functional and useful tool, particularly for people in combat sports. But I found through somebody that I was following and learning from, a man named Paul Wolkowinski, who is in Australia. He had gone to India, and so I started to sort of see the root in India of where that particular exercise came from, and so it made me really dive into what they're doing out there, because the mace is just one part of what the Indians call vyayam, and vyayam is the strength and conditioning that wrestlers do in kushti wrestling. So kushti wrestling is in the loincloth, in the earth. So they wrestle in a very traditional manner, the way that basically all of our ancestors, across the world would have wrestled, which is outside on the ground. Nothing apart from two guys and the earth, and that's it. Um, and so those Indian wrestlers there are still doing a fairly traditional form of wrestling. And they have this set of exercises that go with it. And so I kind of found those exercises, and then I started to kind of try and trace that as far back as I could, and find a bit more out about that. And then it starts to become apparent that that traces back to a similar place as what was happening in Persia, in Iran. And I saw their set of exercises, and so I went in to look into those too. And those
Are
are
they really
also
similar?
they're connected, yeah. So the Iranian one is a little bit different because they have similar tools, but so the Indian exercises where they use clubs and body weight stuff, it's very similar to the Iranian. But the difference is that the Indians, it's done sort of on your own. Maybe there's a group of people, maybe you'll do it together, but there's less emphasis on everybody doing it in time to the same rhythm, same time.
Mhm.
Whereas the Iranians, it's a practice where they all do it at the same time. It's like everyone does the same exercise at the same time, and it's very regimented. You've got somebody who called a morshed who sings and plays the drum and the bell, and so it's all done at the exact same time. Now, that is definitely a tradition that comes from preparing for battle and particularly wrestling. And they used to have, after they'd done their physical exercise in Iran, they would wrestle in what was called in koshti. So it's similar to kushti, it's koshti. And what happened there was that they now, not many places do the wrestling straight afterwards, the traditional wrestling. And so there's been a split where wrestling has been kind of separated away from the physical exercises. And what happens in that instance actually is the traditional exercises start to lose popularity because people no longer can connect it to the wrestling, and the wrestling is something that is very important to them culturally. And so to have the connection is actually an important connection, that those physical exercises have to be kind of connected to the martial aspects. And if it isn't, then the exercises tend to lose significance somewhat because they're out of context. People forget what they're for.
I saw on your Instagram that you've traveled like all over the world. I think Iran as well, India.
Yes,
I
yes, I
mean,
did.
how
I've
was
been
that
to India and Iran.
experience?
Yeah. Pardon me.
How was the experience like?
Yeah, fantastic. So they're kind of very different. But then the thing is, so first of all, people everywhere you go in the world, people are people, and they tend to be nice and welcoming and friendly, and on a level of just human beings interacting with human beings, that's almost always the case. And all my travels have very rarely come across people who don't want to just interact with you like you're a normal human being. All cultural, whatever differences aside, people are people. But then in terms of the actual national cultures in each place, yeah, they're kind of different. And that's what I really love about the travel, actually, is to be able to sort of see those different things. I think it enriches us generally as people. But India is a very interesting place. It's extremely chaotic. There's a lot going on all the time. Um, but if you can get past that chaos, that initial shock, kind of culture shock, there's so much of value to be found, especially if you can find these akaras. They're called akaras, the wrestling gyms. And usually some of them are on a map, maybe on Google Maps, but ultimately you have to kind of go to the place, find some local people and ask questions and find the place. So with Varanasi, which is on the northeast of India, where they do a lot of the mace exercises and club exercises, which you don't necessarily find in other parts of India. That I have connections there who immediately could take me to a lot of places. But for example, I went to Maharashtra, which is where Mumbai is. It's that state. It's on the west coast of India. It's very famous for wrestling, and there's a town there that's particularly famous called Kolhapur, and Kolhapur has some of the best gyms for wrestling, but they're not really on the map. And then what I had to do there was just turn up in the town and find out, okay, I know there's gyms here. I
Oh,
know there are because I've seen sort of pictures and stuff, and I've seen things. So now I'm just going to have to ask some questions and find it. And I ended up finding like an amazing gym called Gangavesh Talim, where the guys are like training twice a day,
the
really
beasts,
hard.
huh? They're
Sorry?
beasts. They're
Yeah,
beasts.
they are beasts. And the thing is like those gyms now they wrestle in the morning in the pit, in the earth pit, and in the evening on the mats. So
Oh,
they're like
cool.
they're wrestling hard twice a day, and they're doing both their traditional and the more modern style, kind of freestyle wrestling, which is kind of cool.
Do they have I was reading a lot on Indian wrestling. I don't have at all the all knowledge that you do, but I read that they even have a specific diet, like a lot of ghee, yogurt, and stuff. Is that
Yeah, right. Yeah, they do. So on the whole, majority, there are some Muslim wrestlers who eat meat, but on the whole, and there are also some Hindus which are called non-veg, meaning they will eat some meat. But on the whole, traditionally, a lot of the wrestlers are non-veg, are veg. They call them veg. So being vegetarians, they eat an enormous amount of ghee for kind of fat, an enormous amount of milk as their protein, almonds and chickpeas and stuff like that. So they have to actually eating, much like it with sumo wrestlers, I guess, eating becomes an exercise in itself. You have to kind of, because if you're not eating meat or eggs or, things like that, then it's going to be harder for you to get the protein you need. And so you
for
have to
sure?
really get that food in from the vegetarian food. So yeah, they do.
In
There's specific.
Iran, did they have a similar diet as well?
No, in Iran they like meat and bread. They,
Great
it's
cuisine,
that.
by the way. Amazing.
Sorry?
Great cuisine in Iran. Like,
Oh yeah, fantastic. Yeah, it was. Yeah. So when I was in Iran, I ate a lot of kebabs and a lot of flatbread. Really delicious and stew. They have a lot of stews and dairy and meat. Yeah, it's fantastic. Actually, I'm very excited. I'm probably gonna be going. Well, I am going back soon at some point. So I'm really excited, not
yeah.
just to see, to do the wrestling and the exercises, but also just to get the food. It's quite hard to.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean India too, but for me, Iranian food, wow, amazing. And I should like I was a heavyweight, so I got to stop with the Iranian food as everyone's telling me in the comments and cheeseburgers. So
I remember in one place, it was in, maybe it was in Tehran. We found this restaurant and it was kebabs. They took the lamb kebab off, and then it was just kebab and butter and bread. And it was so good and so rich. But wow, yeah, that was something else. Like I just remember that's something that's just gonna stay with me forever. I'm like, man, if I could get hold of that again, I'd be
oh
happy with that.
yeah. And especially after doing such hard workouts, because those workouts look crazy tough.
Yeah, they are. They're hard, and it's like it's done for a long period of time. So in Iran, a lot of the exercises, a lot of it. So the initial exercises are on a board, a push-up board, and so they're doing a lot of things like hundreds of push-ups. I mean that's kind of hard. But we in the West have got this idea of like doing pushes, but they do hundreds of them, and now they do a different timing to it. So there's a bit more of a recovery between each one,
Mhm.
and there's different phases of it, but they're doing high volume. So high volume push-ups, high volume club swinging, high volume everything. They do these huge wooden shields called sang, some of which the top level guys on lifting those things. They're each one is like 50 to 60 kilos. You
Wow, I
know,
didn't think that. Wow.
so they are huge. Some of these things are super heavy. So yeah, they work really hard. I mean, and what's interesting is you see them, they're very strong. It's kind of a different kind of strength in a sense, because if you go to a gym and you lift weights as a bodybuilder, you get these very defined kind of sets of muscles. But in both Indian and Iranian tradition, their body type is more uniform. Rather than being separate muscle groups, they work out like a motion, a movement. It's a movement
Very
pattern.
dynamic, huh?
Yeah, it is. It's dynamic, and it's also whole body each time. And essentially, there's parts that isolate to some degree, but it's not that kind of Western gym style of extremely isolated this exercise, then this exercise, and exercise. It's very martial or
Yeah.
grappling specific motions that translate directly into it. So the body they get doesn't look like a kind of cut gym body with like thing, but they are strong, and on the whole fairly lean, even but then muscular, but not with that kind of bodybuilder's body. It's very much a um, you can see they look like a grappler,
Oh yeah.
and
And they got
people
a
kind of,
grappling culture there, man. I mean,
oh yeah, for sure, yeah. It's a national sport,
yeah. I mean,
and they've
top
got
three
different,
wrestling countries too. I mean,
yeah, oh yeah,
yeah. Man, like,
yeah.
do you find like there's certain exercises that work better maybe for wrestling and maybe for like say BJJ or catch or something?
That's interesting. I think a lot of the exercises are there because their exercises are definitely for wrestling. Um, BJJ, I mean, you go to India and you talk. We did some BJJ in India in one of the akaras, like to show them, and the wrestlers there just thought we were insane. Like, why are you not putting your back on the mat and fighting from the ground?
Yeah.
So so the exercises don't they translate to BJJ and catch and stuff in terms of the stand-up stuff particularly. And if you play a heavy top game, like I play a heavy top game, because I don't really like being on my back very much, so I play a heavy top game when I do BJJ, and when I those exercises definitely all of the exercises help there, especially the kind of the body weight. So in India, they've got lots of these. In fact, I mean, with Iran, it's the crossover too, but these kind of squatting exercises called betaks, and then the dans, which are these kind of push-ups, where it's almost like a downward dog from
Oh, okay, yeah.
yeah from yoga, it looks like, and those are exercises for sprawling and sprawling on your opponent and stuff. So really, it is more wrestling specific across the board, but they will translate into BJJ and other forms of grappling, particularly in the stand-up part and in the if you play a heavy top game. If you're playing a bottom game, I think it's kind of harder to find something in those exercises because really they are from cultures that you
They're
know
martial in a way, right? They were for killing, you know?
Right. Well, that's the thing. I mean, let's face it. If you're on a battlefield and you get put on your back, you're done. That's
Oh,
it.
yeah,
You're
you got a
finished.
quick knife, bam, you're done.
Yeah, right. Which is why ultimately wrestling is a great expression of battlefield art because its aim is to put you on your back. So its aim is to say, there you go. I've essentially
Boom.
killed you. I've
Yeah.
shown you I could have killed you by putting you on your back. And so that then, develops some in those cultures into like what we have as modern wrestling. But if you go from the root of modern wrestling back, like the concept of putting somebody on their back is saying, I win because if we were fighting with weapons for keeps and I put you on your back, that's it.
You're done.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. So in answer to the question, yeah, it's most the exercises are really for wrestling and those apply to BJJ, but they're if you're looking for something that's extremely kind of bottom game specific, maybe you need to kind of find something slightly different.
Yeah. I, from what I see and I saw on your page, I agree. Like you have some amazing stuff there. Like I recommend
Thank
everyone
you.
to check it out. The bottom game I always found, because I've been doing BJJ for a long time as well, I
Yeah,
always found it's very like static. You gotta, unless you talk butterfly, and top game is very explosive and dynamic,
that's how
right?
I feel too. Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I train with some really good bottom players who have extremely hard guard to pass. Um, and if they're smart on the bottom, they can have they do have moments of explosivity, especially leg lockers.
Yeah.
I find those bottom leg lockers like they're very tricky. I find them difficult to deal with.
Very effective. You
Yeah.
know?
So I mean, yeah. So I mean, I train in Connecticut in the US in a 10th Planet gym. And so
Oh,
10th
cool.
Planet, they have a lot of it's always evolving. The good thing about 10th Planet is it will always take what is useful and bring it into what the game, so that's where there's a lot of wrestling stuff as well. It's people always think of it as being all bottom game, but actually a lot of us are just top players actually
I'm
anyway.
a huge fan of Food Planet, by the way. So
Yeah, it's great, fantastic stuff. It's really what grabs me about BJJ was this 10th planet. But though, so I have a lot of guys I train with who are really good on the bottom, really good leg lockers. But yeah, I think you're right. Like the top, because the emphasis is on the guy at the top to make a lot of the moves. You know, you're the one who has to pass that guard, and it's like, so a lot of like you said, like a lot of those explosive exercises really are like for a top player.
do you, I noticed also something that was really interesting because myself, I'm interested in this. I see you also know a lot about English and I would say British, like from the IO martial arts, which and
Yeah.
wrestling systems, which are there's not enough info on them, and you seem
Oh,
to be pushing it, man, and I love it.
yeah, I do want to. So, I mean, WarYoga's bigger aim is to kind of like, sort of go across, like, because I was talking about these Indo-Europeans, that went into Europe. So I've gone into India and Iran, and then I want to now trace through and see where else it went. And so obviously you've got my next phase is the Greek stuff, but like ultimately it's going to end in the UK. And so I was raised in the UK, as you can tell from my accent. I guess I'm an Englishman. But I actually originally many years ago, and through all my life really since I was a teenager, I guess, I've been fascinated with. In England, we had bare knuckle boxing in the 18th century and 19th century.
The English martial art.
Yeah, exactly. They call it the art of manual defense. So we were known for being like fighters in the
Backwards.
sense that we settled things with our fists, and that's how disputes were settled. The Victorians have changed a lot of that stuff, but pre-Victorian era we were really known for that. And so I was always fascinated in that, and so I used to do a lot of research into bare knuckle boxing, and I reconstructed a lot of it myself from what the old texts said. Like there are some very famous boxing texts that came out, particularly people like Daniel Mendoza, who was a very famous boxer in England at the time. And so they wrote a lot of these boxing treaties. So we have books about that, but it's like really arcane, old language, difficult to understand. So I had several years of just reconstructing that. But then what I found out about bare knuckle boxing in England is some of the champions of England were pure wrestlers, because bare knuckle boxing in England allowed for takedowns.
Oh
Because the rule
wow!
set was, the rule set was, there's no round limit length, and there's no number of rounds. It was just as many rounds it took, and a round finished when one person hit the ground. And then they then had 30 seconds to get back to the center, to the scratch lines, their lines in the middle
Could
called the
someone
scratch
stay
line.
on top of them, or they had to
Oh,
stand up?
yeah,
Could
no, one of them was actually had to stand up again. So you could either knock someone down by punching them, or you could throw them down. And so the second to last champion of England was just a pure wrestler, pure wrestler. He won by pile driving the guy into the ground.
So English, huh?
Yeah, right, right. God,
Oh my! Yeah.
exactly, yeah. So it's kind of funny, that this so I thought, wow, this is kind of interesting. And then I discovered that because of the way that it was, there was people coming in from wrestling and from there wasn't really boxing as such, but became boxing backgrounds. And these wrestlers came for things like Cornish wrestling or Northumbrian wrestling. And these are the Northumbrian, people. If we said that today to most people in England wouldn't know what that was. You'd say, oh, it's Devonshire wrestling. And they'd say, what? What's that? I've never heard of it. And so I think it's really important. So one of the things I've started doing recently actually is doing more research into that. And next time I go back to England, every time I go back to England now, I'm going to aim to try and go and train in some of these last few places where they're still doing it, so I can get some sort of video and put that out there into the world, because it's kind of, these things die off, and they die because people stop talking about them or stop doing them.
I have a,
Uh,
it's kind of interesting. Sorry to there. A lot of people don't know freestyle wrestling, the roots are English. Catches
ah,
catch
yeah,
can.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
wondered what happened to England? Like, why did wrestling decline, right? Because we had
That is a
freestyle catches.
very interesting question. Um, so yeah, because in the late 19th century, there was still some fairly strong wrestling going on, and actually, what's really interesting is that I put a video a while back, and it was from the 1920s, and it was catch wrestling being done in London, and people saying, "Oh, they're trying to do a revival because it's dying out." And so I think a lot of it is to do with the Victorians ultimately, because the reason that, and it's funny because boxing didn't die out, which is kind of interesting here too,
Yeah.
because so the Victorians, when they started to make it industrialized and have the factories, so when people started to shift from the countryside into the cities to work in the factories, they didn't like these, what were called at the time fancy sports, which were the kind of combat sports and involved all sorts of other things. But they liked team sports because team sports like soccer or cricket encouraged people to work together. And so you could have this factory team. And so the Victorians were regulators. They like to have rules. They like to have time frames. They like to have everything regimented. So they like to have the workday regimented, and they like to regiment leisure time too. And so they wanted to control not only people's work time, their factory workers' work time, but also their leisure time. And so I think the encouragement of people to go into football teams, soccer teams, and to go into cricket teams and to do those other team sports, which were like, I mean, a lot of the football teams in England came from factory teams, like,
West Ham.
yeah, right. Yeah. A lot of them were like from, various, I mean, they still have in England a team called Vauxhall Motors, and maybe they're finished now, but that were actually just the car factory team, so it's kind of interesting that I think the thing that really killed off wrestling in England is probably that. But the other interesting thing is that boxing survived. But boxing survived because in English schools they used to have the boys boxing.
Oh, that's
They
great.
changed the rules, so it was like a bit different. Boxing's rules changed because of the Victorians to being glove boxing and time limits and that sort of thing. But in English schools, up until probably the 1950s or 60s, they used to have boxing as part of the gym class, the PE class. But that finished. So that's why boxing kind of went into a bit of a decline, but it remained in the cities, in the working class areas of cities. They used to have boxing gyms for the young boys to be able to kind of go and box outside of school. But wrestling, for some reason, completely fell by the wayside, and we didn't do it in school. We don't have any kind of college wrestling as such, so it's
None.
something. I don't know how exactly, but I feel like it might be something. It's the rise of team sports, I think.
I think you're right. Um, I noticed that you also do quite a bit of martial arts yourself. What
Yeah.
like what do you train? Because you also seem to be reviving old martial arts, which is very
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, thanks. Yeah. So yeah, I'm the next phase of war yoga is going into Greece, and the Greeks, ancient Greeks, were famous for, in terms of my particular focus, the three heavy sports they called them, and the heavy sports were palais, which is wrestling, pyrmachia, which is fist fighting or boxing, and pancration, which was all powers, it means. And it's essentially a mix of stand up striking and grappling on the ground, with takedowns and so on. And so I'm really interested in that because there is a lot of value in, I think, in finding out what those looked like, because Greek wrestling is one of the oldest forms of ancient Greek wrestling is one of the oldest forms of wrestling um, in the world, and it's certainly in Europe. It's the oldest form of European wrestling that's recorded. Um, Kickmachia, the fist fighting boxing. I mean, ultimately, um, they're one of the earliest forms of boxing, and even those English bare knuckle boxers tried to look back to the Greek boxing for inspiration when they were trying to build their boxing tradition. And then Pancration, it's almost like a mythical thing. Like people have heard of it. It became modern pancration or pancrase. But the actual original one is sort of shrouded in mystery to some degree, but is ultimately what they call the original MMA,
Yeah.
because it was the first combat sport where they said, yeah, you can wrestle and you can strike.
And they had
In a
submissions too, right? I
sorry.
think they also had submissions.
Yes, it is. It's submission. So ultimately, there's a bit of, it's probably had different regional variations and variations over time because it had over 1,000 years of being
Oh.
performed as a sport. Which is, I mean, think about how long we've had MMA. I mean, imagine if MMA was ended up lasting 1,000 years, how it would develop and change. But um, yeah, there was definitely stand up. So stand up striking, which is kicks, knees, elbows, punches. I don't know headbutts. We think because there's no depictions of it and no one talks about it. And as there's a great channel on YouTube, guy called Amo Pancraton. He's actually talked about this, but he saying, in a sport like Lethwei in Burmese boxing, the headbutt's allowed and it becomes a very strong feature and it's used all the time. But there's no depictions of it in Pancration, so we can assume it was probably not allowed because
So
if it
like such
was,
a strong thing.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's such a
for
strong
sure they
move.
would talk about it.
Yeah, you'd see it. And then the other rule, maybe at least there's one recorded rule in Asia Minor, in a Greek settlement in Asia Minor, where the rule set didn't allow striking on the ground, so no ground and pound. So you could take them down, but once you got to the ground, you could only grapple, submission grapple. So whether that was widespread into all of Pancration, we don't know. But it's kind of interesting. It could have been that Pancration ultimately looked a lot like Muay Thai in the stand-up, and then looked a lot like essentially what's become modern no-gi BJJ on the ground. So it would have been
Cool.
quite an interesting synthesis. So maybe it was as soon as they took you down, you had to grapple, you couldn't strike.
And
So
the Greeks were so ahead, they just were like
but
another thing.
yeah, I mean, it's what a time. I mean, I like to say, there's nothing new under the sun. Every time we think of something as being, oh, this new thing just happened, it's like that's not new. That must have existed. You're not the first person. No one's ever the first person to think of something. It's like
The
someone's
only
done it.
thing I ever saw that I agree with you that I thought this might be new was actually when I saw some of the stuff coming out 10th Planet. I was like,
Yeah,
you know, that might be new, some of it, but
yeah, that's
I
true.
agree.
Some of that weird stuff. Yeah.
But I
Yeah, I
agree.
don't know if the Greeks ever did the sorcerer. I know. In fact, I've never seen anyone actually do some of those moves live in my life. Actually, so even that thing. Yeah,
So sorry to go to another thing. What are the health benefits of this type of cross training compared to um, CrossFit or bodybuilding?
that's a good question. So I would say, obviously, aside from the martial connection, that it works very well as a synthesis for anyone who's doing combat sports, that it actually uses their motions. If you're looking at it from another perspective of health, then I would say it's got two main benefits over something like bodybuilding, powerlifting, or CrossFit, which is the first thing is that it is more holistic. It uses the whole body in movement. So it's actually kind of, I don't like to use the word functional training very much, but I mean, it ultimately is a more functional form. I mean, it practices movement over specific isolated strength. So it means that your body kind of is a much more unified, it operates in a more unified manner. So the muscles that support each other all get the work in as well, rather than just overbuilding one thing and then ending up with sort of problems where something else is weaker and needs fixing. So I would say, first of all, there's that it's more unified and therefore, builds a more structured or smooth, a more unified body. But also, I'd say it's a little bit more gentle. It's gentler on the body because lifting. So, for example, if you're lifting weights and in CrossFit, it's like a lot of pushing the body to do more than it really should be able to do. Now, I understand that too. The idea you can push beyond something, but it basically is gentle on the body because the body hasn't got to kind of strain on individual exercises in the same way. So because you recruit more of the body, it makes it much gentler. I mean, a body weight exercise on the whole is not going to get you injured in the same way as a heavily weighted exercise. That being said, there are heavily weighted exercises that we'll do, like the Garnal, which is a stone ring around the neck.
Yeah, I saw
But
that.
yeah, it's that's great, and it's really great for wrestlers because it means you have to kind of keep your head up because it wants to pull your head down. So it's just a perfect back chain exercise. So it involves squat plus back chain at the same time. So, while it is a weighted exercise, I feel it's gentler on my body than if I had a bar. I was trying to do back or even front squats. It's like
Yeah.
it's got it feels gentler on my body basically. So essentially it's sort of health. In terms of health, I think you've got more longevity of practice because you're not like really beating your body up in the same way as you can do with iron and lifting weights and stuff.
So Tom, tell me, I see you're building a war yoga type of movement in the US and hopefully globally. How's that going? Tell me more about it.
Yeah, okay, great. Yes, I'm trying to do that in simple terms. So I'm based in the Northeast, in the US. This has mostly been a kind of online thing in its initial stages, just trying to kind of get people more aware of what I'm doing. But I've started building in the area I'm in particularly and expanding beyond that. So doing workshops, and so in-person workshops. So I've done a few recently in New Jersey, New York, Massachusetts. I'll probably be doing another one in Connecticut, which is where I'm based, in the next few months. And then, beyond that. So initially it's been in this sort of New England area where I've been doing the real in-person, showing people the skills, getting people interested, and people are really interested to do it. And so when they come to those workshops, I get quite a kind of aha moments with people where they suddenly realize, oh wait, I get this. Especially from martial artists and grapplers, they really get it. And then, but even beyond that, people who are just uh, fitness instructors or people in general, physical culture, let's call it, kind of get these aha moments. So it's been this kind of build initially, well, first of all, digitally, and now in this local area here. But because I have a lot of interest in other parts of the States, it's a matter of now I'm going to start kind of expanding out to do more workshops in other parts of the US. I definitely am looking to kind of do something on the West Coast at some point in the near future. And it's kind of amazing what I see is when people start to really click with what I'm doing or really kind of get it. You start seeing them doing the exercises online and they post and they tag me and something like that. And it's really amazing to see people not only start doing the exercises, but then develop in them and then just start to realize how beneficial it is. And so that's how it's going to build ultimately is people seeing what's going on, trying it for themselves, and if possible, doing a workshop, coming in person and doing a workshop and learning those very small, the finer details that are really going to make their technique and their practice more powerful. So my plan is that right now, New England, across the US, I've got people around the US. I need them to make some more of the tools though. So I tell people how to make all the stuff that we
I saw
use.
on your site actually.
Yeah, make it. It's free. Take it, like use it. And so I want people to kind of like, build those tools. And if people build those tools, then it would save me a great deal of transportation if take many hundreds of kilos of concrete and would around the country, you know.
And explaining it to people, what is this that you're
Yeah,
taking
yeah.
off your neck?
Make it. So the plan is more in the US, and I'd like to get into. I mean, I've got a lot of people in Europe as well, particularly who you know, I've started getting lots of followers and people doing a lot of the stuff in UK, Italy, all across Europe now, and so I really want to come and try and build and do some workshops in Europe. I have some good friends in various parts who I've connected to through our very similar practices, and then them really connecting with what war yoga is.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, my plan is to expand across the globe. But I'd really like to spread what I'm doing because not because I want to have this amazing influence around the world, but because I really believe in what it is. I really believe it's an extremely beneficial thing, and I think in the time we're at in terms of how the world is, it's a really important thing that people can kind of take ownership of their own kind of future and take ownership of their body and their mind and just become this kind of very powerful version of themselves, and to kind of mix both the to talk about it in Greek philosophical terms, someone like Socrates, the idea that you need a powerful mind and a powerful body. That not you can't just be a warrior and you can't just be a philosopher. That you have to have some combination of those two things. You can't be all action and no thought, and you can't be all thought and no action. That you need to
Right.
have that marriage of the two, and that's what's going to make a really powerful human being. And so I really like that message to kind of, and that idea to get out into the world more, because I think it's just so helpful for people. They can really, take that and turn it into something really amazing for themselves.
I noticed that you have quite a few books, and also war yoga, just like you said, there's a lot of physicality there, also martial, but you also talk about a spiritual, like philosophical, and that I
Yeah.
found to be interesting. Tell me more about that if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So far I've written the book on the Indian book, a book on India called War Yoga, and a book on Iran called War Yoga Zorkhane. Zorkhane is the house of strength. They do the
Okay,
practice.
I mean, now it makes sense. Now I
Yeah,
saw that all the time. Okay.
yeah. The first War Yoga is it looks at the Vedas, which are the very ancient books from India, and it looks at the philosophical concepts and metaphysical, spiritual concepts that come out of the Veda. And so it ties those into the exercises too. I'm not sure if that's ever been done before, particularly taking exactly Vedic concepts and the physical concepts, putting them together. The Indians have some concept of that, but it's never been presented to the West in that manner. And so I took that, and it's essentially in that first book, it's about the idea of the self-sacrifice. So the self-sacrifice to me means it's the sacrificing of the lower part of yourself to the higher part of yourself. So there's this, that you can get rid of those things which are lower in you, because everyone has like instincts that are not good for you. Maybe
Cheeseburger.
smart, yeah, whatever. So they do things that aren't good, and you can sacrifice that, cut that,
Yeah.
offer that as a sacrifice to the higher version of yourself, to the better you. And so ultimately that's kind of the heart of the first war yoga book. And the second war yoga book talks about a very similar concept, which is the inner holy war. So that goes from the Avesta, which is the ancient Zoroastrian texts, which actually have influenced like a lot of things since. Like they've influenced most of um, uh,
Abrahamic religions are from that.
spirituality, religious spirituality, in the West and beyond. And so that is the idea of the inner holy war, which is that inside there's when you're fighting externally, what you're really doing is you're expressing an internal battle between the dark and the light within you. That you're trying to defeat that darkness within you in order that the lightness within you can prevail, can win. So that's the philosophy in the second WarYoga book. And so really a lot it's this metaphysical ideas in WarYoga that, the external things you do are reflected internally, that there's a conflict outside, like whether that's grappling or fighting, any kind of fighting, which actually is really, you should manifest that as something that happens inside you. That's a transformation that happens within. And anybody who's wrestled or fought will know that that can be a kind of powerful, almost spiritual experience, because it takes you to a place mentally which is hard to explain to people who haven't been to that place, but it gives you these sort of sense of being in that moment and in that clarity. There's just some
Zen
mental.
in a way, right?
Sorry.
Like Zen in a way.
Yeah, it is. I think so. I mean, it takes you to a place where all the things that do not matter in life and all the worries you may have had have just dissipate, because they don't matter in that moment, because they're not going to help you in that moment in time. And so anybody who's had some kind of combat experience, be it grappling, striking, or anything, will understand that idea that there is something more than just a physical aspect to those. There is a, a spiritual aspect, and however you decide to term that, in your own personal terms, there's a spirituality to kind of the warrior culture, for want of a better word. And that's really the heart of WarYoga. That I can't go into a battle like an action, either being a war or being a fight in a ring or being a grappling match. I can't go into that just from a physical perspective. I have to be mentally prepared. And that mental preparation is also a kind of spiritual preparation too. You have to be kind of unified in your mind, body, and spirit to be able to go out there and do that. And it does take a certain kind of person to kind of really thrive in that environment of combat. But almost anybody can take something from it as well. It may not be for everybody, but everybody can get something from that.
Absolutely. It's kind of interesting you say it because it's like a spiritual type of sports psychology, because a lot of sports psychologists said that. I remember when Randy Couture was interviewed and he said before a wrestling match, I mean, he already has won. Like he's so certain and so mentally on cue that
Yeah,
wrestling was almost not the easy part, but that was there, went quick. But very interesting.
yeah,
I think that has a lot of importance to today's world.
I think so. I think so. I think it's one of the missing parts in some regards for a lot of people. We live in a very material world, and the spirituality, however people wish to express that spirituality, is something that shouldn't be neglected. And whether you want that as a specifically religious spirituality, or however you want to, express that, to me, the spiritual is understanding that there's something deeper than just what's on the surface. And in very material world, having something else, something that's like some kind of spiritual practice of some manner, whether that's just meditation, or whatever you want that to be, enables you to be able to operate in a more healthy manner in the world. Because I mean, it's a very material world, and I mean, there's nothing that we can do about that.
No.
But what you can do is know how you can operate. How it again, it's almost stoic, to be that sort of, you can't change the world, but you can change how you react to the world. And so there's definitely an element of that, I think.
I absolutely love that. I absolutely
Yeah.
love that. Tom, what are your plans for War Yoga in 2024? I know you said about Greece and beyond, but
Yeah.
anything you want to let us know about?
Yeah, so well, I mean, I'm going to be a few things actually. So I'm 2024 this year is I'm going to be continuing doing a lot of the material to do with Iran, increasingly going to be more things about the reconstruction of Pancration, and trying to do some of the kind of Greek wrestling style to try and figure out more about what that was, exactly how that looked. And that is for two things. One, to see how that could basically the history of grappling and combat sports to see where it came from. You know, that's in itself an interesting thing, but also see if there's anything of value that could add into people's current combat sports. You know, I mean, you know, you can always look to the ancients and see what happened. I mean,
Absolutely.
there's an Egyptian tomb. I can't remember the name of it, with wrestling positions painted on the tomb side. So it's
Oh,
like,
cool.
you know, there's stuff there that, you know, you could have a look at if you were so inclined, you know. There'll be more of that 2024. I'm also going to be looking to try to build a video course for the Indian material, because I've been doing a lot of the workshops, and so people who are able to travel can come and join in the workshop. But I want to create a kind of workshop, a digital workshop experience, so people who can't travel to a workshop have the opportunity to be able to get as much instruction as I can give at a workshop, but through the medium of video, basically. So I'm going to be developing that this year. Whether that can finish this year or not is a different matter, but I'll definitely, that's one of my priorities for building. I've got to get that kind of up and running. And then beyond, yeah, I mean, 2025 will be the Greek War Yoga book. So that's like, I'm going to have about 2 years or more of research.
Yasu.
So that's, yes, indeed. And that's very close to my heart because I'm half Greek Cypriot. So, you know, I have some skin in the game there,
Shout
shall we
out
say.
to Cyprus, man. I'm a big fan as well.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, yeah. It's a great country, and you know, I'm excited about hopefully getting back to Cyprus at some point soon to see my family out there and eat some great food, um, which is good. And then continue to push beyond. So, you know, in the future, War Yoga is going to continue its journey of looking into more of these Indo-European grappling cultures and seeing what it can turn up, because by dipping into those things, hopefully it can yield something interesting for the people who are living now.
Absolutely agree. Um, Tom, I think we're about done here. Is there
Yeah.
anything you want like to share? How can people check you out? Find your books, find your
Oh
stuff,
yeah. Well, thanks. Yeah. So my main social account is War Yoga on Instagram, just one word, War Yoga.
and it will be at the in the description, boys. So check it out, and girls. So
Thanks. And then I have waryoga.com, which is a kind of hub for where I put a lot of things. It's developing, and over time, it's going to get better and better and better. I have a War Yoga YouTube channel where I put some longer form videos. I'm trying to build that over the next year or two too, because I've somewhat neglected YouTube. And then I have my War Yoga books, which are available on Amazon.com. So, or Amazon, any Amazon actually, they're available on Amazon globally and other websites too, but Amazon is the one most people use.
I also saw you
And
got some
so
cool t-shirts. Cool
yeah,
t-shirts.
I've got some t-shirts too on waryoga.com.
Yeah.
So yeah, and every now and again I'll release do a special release of something called Rash Guard or something like that, you know, every now and again as a special. But yeah, so that's where I'm at really. I'm on Amazon as War Yoga and War Yoga Zurkhane, on YouTube, War Yoga. I'm also, I have, if you've got Telegram or one of those things, almost any social you can find War Yoga, but Instagram is where I'm really posting
You
mostly.
got a
So
great page. I highly recommend everyone to join
thank you
it.
so much. So have you. I really love
Thank you.
Grapplezilla. It's like been it's fantastic. There's always amazing stuff on there, and it's like it's really inspirational because you think, oh,
We're going to
now I've got
continue
to go
to.
out. Now I've got to go out and wrestle with some Tartars. You know, I mean.
Tough boys, huh? Tough boys,
Yeah, they look it. They look it.
you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so I just want to say, Tom, you're a really awesome guy. Now I understand a lot about War Yoga. Thank you very much.
Thank
And I
you, Joe.
just
I
want to
really
say,
appreciate it.
I'll be checking out a lot more of your stuff, and hopefully, in the future, we'll have you on again. And
Yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to. It's been a great conversation. Really great discussion. I love it.
thanks for sharing the knowledge. I appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's my absolute pleasure.
Cool. So until next time, we will see each other and have a great day, buddy.
You too, man. Thank you.
Okay. Bye, Tom.
Bye bye. Bye bye.